Henry Turner and the Mystery of the Missing Sister. Chapter 5. Confrontations. Detective Henry Turner waited anxiously for backup to arrive at the remote cabin. The evidence suggested that Emily was still alive, but time was running out. The text message on the discarded phone indicated she was about to be moved to a new location. As soon as the police units arrived, Henry briefed them on the situation. "We need to act quickly," Henry urged the officers. "Emily Prescott is being held against her will. Our best lead is that they're moving her soon. We have to intercept them before they disappear again." The officers nodded, their faces grim. They split into teams, with some staying behind to comb through the cabin for further evidence, while others prepared to move out. Henry, leading the charge, coordinated with the local police to set up roadblocks and checkpoints around the area. As they sped towards the probable routes, Henry's mind raced. He reviewed the information he'd gathered about Charles Montgomery's associates and the possible locations they might use. One name stood out: an abandoned warehouse, owned by one of Charles's shell companies, situated on the outskirts of the city. Henry's convoy arrived at the warehouse just as dusk was falling. The building loomed large and foreboding, its windows dark and its exterior crumbling. The officers spread out, encircling the warehouse to cover all exits. Henry and a small team of officers approached the main entrance, their weapons drawn. He signaled for them to breach the door, and with a loud crash, they burst inside. The interior was a maze of old machinery and stacked crates, casting long shadows in the dim light. "Search every corner," Henry ordered. "Emily could be anywhere in here." The team fanned out, moving cautiously through the warehouse. Henry's heart pounded as he led the search, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. As he turned a corner, he heard muffled voices coming from a room at the back of the building. Henry signaled for silence and crept closer, his gun at the ready. He could hear two men talking, their voices tense and hurried. "We need to move her now," one of them said. "The cops are getting too close." "Relax," the other replied. "We've got time. Just make sure she's secure." Henry motioned for his team to follow as he approached the door. With a swift kick, he broke it open and stormed into the room, his gun trained on the two men inside. "Freeze! Police!" Henry shouted. The men, caught off guard, raised their hands in surrender. Behind them, tied to a chair and looking exhausted but alive, was Emily Prescott. Her eyes widened in relief as she saw Henry. "Emily, are you okay?" Henry asked, moving quickly to untie her. "I'm fine, just shaken," she replied, her voice weak. "Thank you, Detective." Henry nodded, his relief palpable. He signaled for the officers to take the two men into custody. As they led the suspects away, Henry turned back to Emily. "We need to get you out of here," he said gently. "You're safe now, but there's still a lot we need to sort out." Outside the warehouse, paramedics were waiting to check on Emily. Henry stayed by her side, making sure she was comfortable. As she was being examined, Henry's phone rang. It was his contact at the precinct. "Henry, we've got Charles Montgomery in custody," the voice on the other end said. "We picked him up, trying to leave the city. He's not talking, but we have enough to hold him." Henry felt a sense of satisfaction. The web of deceit was finally unraveling those responsible were being brought to justice. Once Emily was safely in the ambulance, Henry turned his attention to the next steps. He needed to get a full statement from her and ensure her safety until Charles Montgomery and his associates were fully prosecuted. He climbed into the back of the ambulance to ride with her to the hospital. At the hospital, Henry waited while the doctors checked Emily over. She was physically unharmed, but clearly traumatized. When she was finally settled into a room, Henry sat beside her. "Emily, I need you to tell me everything," Henry said gently. "From the beginning. What exactly did you uncover about Charles?" Emily took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I found out that Charles was involved in illegal arms deals. He was using his legitimate businesses as a front. I got the proof from Victor Larson and planned to take it to the authorities. But Charles found out. He sent his men after me to stop me." Henry nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Why didn't you go to the police immediately?" "I wanted to confront Charles first," Emily admitted. "I thought maybe I could convince him to stop. But when I saw him at the gala, I realized how dangerous he really was. That's when I decided to hide the evidence and go to the police. But they caught me before I could." Henry listened intently, understanding the gravity of her situation. "You were incredibly brave, Emily. But now, we need to make sure this evidence gets into the right hands and that everyone involved is held accountable." Over the next few days, Henry worked tirelessly with Emily and the police to build a solid case against Charles Montgomery and his network. The evidence they had gathered was overwhelming, and with Emily's testimony, they had the key to bringing down the entire operation. In a final confrontation, Henry faced Charles Montgomery in the interrogation room. Charles, now stripped of his power and influence, sat across the table, his demeanor cold and defiant. "Your game is over, Charles," Henry said, his voice steady. "We have all the evidence we need to put you away for a long time." Charles glared at Henry, but said nothing. The weight of his crimes hung heavily in the air, and he knew there was no escape. With the case wrapped up, Henry visited Emily one last time at the hospital. She was recovering well, her strength and spirit slowly returning. "Thank you, Detective Turner," Emily said, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved my life." Henry smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment. "Just doing my job, Emily. Take care of yourself." As he left the hospital, Henry reflected on the case. It had been a challenging journey, filled with twists and dangers, but justice had prevailed. And for Henry Turner, that was the most important thing of all.